talking about Derry City. So my understanding of that is that the Northern Executive has a rule that if they fund a stadium, if the stadium is council owned, that the council have to put up 40% of the funding. So if it's 100 grand or say $1 million of an investment, that they'll put up 600 grand if for example, Derry City is owned by the corporation, so that they would have to, Derry City would have to put up 400 grand. But if it's a club that owns their own stadium, it's a 10% rule, so it would be 900 against 100. And the allegation is that that rule is brought in because Derry City is the only, I think there is one more, all right, one or two more, but they're smaller clubs and they're not going to be building big infrastructure projects. So the allegation is that this was brought in as a way of not giving money to Derry, basically. And the the allegation that has been made is that it's a sectarian motive.
Sorry to hear that. I haven't heard the details on that. I mean, like, if it's a soccer stadium, it's a soccer stadium, no matter what league it's in. Why should it be any different to the Oval or any other stadium that needs a lot of work done to it? It's
But
still.
absolutely, but that's the thing, you know. I suppose I'm not going to go down to the rabbit hole of Casement Park because that's been discussed to death. But again, the rugby stadium was built, the soccer stadium was built, and the J stadium wasn't built. And this is, I'm not, I haven't, I'm not up to 100%, so I don't want to pass an opinion. But these are the allegations being made that it's basically discriminatory, and this is just another example of it.
Yeah, I'll have to look into more detail on that, but that's even more pressure on Gordon Lyons, the communities minister. That's assuming that he actually feels that he is under pressure, but he's certainly trying to help some other soccer projects. So I think they need to create a new system for sorting all of this out. And my idea would be to match the funding both by the British government and by the Irish government. The Irish government's already offering 50 million euros, which is about 40 million pounds. The UK government hasn't confirmed any money at all. Obviously, we already know that the other contributors are putting in 120. The latest stadium price is 260, and therefore there's a difference of 140. So my proposal would be that the Irish government would put in another 40. They would actually match their current contribution again. They would double their contribution. So that would mean that we still had their original 40 and we had another 40. So where does that leave the UK government? That means that the UK government is going to have to put in 100 million, because if they had that football tournament, they would have had to have put in 100 million anyway. Otherwise, the stadium would never have been built. So this business of London not actually volunteering an amount of money, it's completely ruining the stability of our communities, because they would have had to put their hand into their pocket anyway in order to build Casement Park in the first place if that tournament had have taken place. But I haven't finished yet. If the Irish government is actually doubling their money, and we're assuming that the British government should have been putting in at least 100 million in the first place, I'm actually asking them to double their money as well. But the difference is that the extra 100 million from them wouldn't be going to Casement Park, because obviously we already would have our 260 million anyway for Casement Park. It would be going to the other stadiums, and maybe that could even include Derry as well. Why not? Why not have another 100 million going to the other stadiums, going to Windsor Park for a specific reason that I'll mention in a wee second, going to the Oval, which desperately needs work done to it, and why not going to the Candy Stripes as well? And then whatever would be left would be going to maybe a few of the medium-sized stadiums. Well, I say medium-sized stadiums in Northern Ireland terms because most of our stadiums are pretty tiny anyway. But circling back to Windsor Park, there's a specific reason why Windsor Park needs more money, and it's not a major addition. It's because of the Women's World Cup. I don't know whether anybody's seen that or not. It was in the Belfast Telegraph there on Friday or Saturday. The criteria for the Women's World Cup has been brought down to 20,000. So that means that Windsor Park would only need another 11 or 1200 seats. So that's not going to be big money. And therefore, like I say, that extra money that I'm talking about, it's the same formula for the British government, same formula for the Irish government. The current contributors are still putting in what they were putting in before, and we will have the 260 for Casement, and we will also have an extra £100 million for any other stadiums that need work done to them, totally without prejudice, whether it's Windsor Park, whether it's the Oval, whether it's the Candy Stripes. Why not do that there? And also, I think Ian's chomping at the bit to come in. I'll bring you in a wee second, Ian Clark. Also, let's not forget there still is other money that hasn't been spent yet for grassroots football. Gordon Lyons does have other money anyway for those other stadia. So let me summarise. We are 140 million short for Casement Park. What I'm asking is for another 40 to come from Dublin and 100 to come from London. But if London is contributing 100 for Casement Park, it means that they have to contribute another 100 for the other football stadiums of whatever type that they are. That's all I'm trying to say. It's a wee bit like match funding. You hear about people contributing a certain amount and then they get that amount of funding matched. I'm asking Dublin to match what they've already pledged, and I'm asking London to say that they are going to contribute 100 million to Casement Park, but only on the condition that they contribute another 100 million pounds to the other stadiums as well. Is that not perfectly fair? Because there's two things we cannot do now. Number one, we cannot go back over what was arranged in 2011 because it's too long ago anyway. We can't start nitpicking and saying, "Oh, Ravenhill got this, Windsor Park got that, blah 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 blah." That's water under the bridge. That was arranged a long, long time ago. And number two, there's nothing we can do about inflation. Inflation is hitting Casement Park. Inflation is hitting Windsor Park. Inflation is hitting the Oval. We all have to deal with inflation, and therefore they do need the extra money no matter what. And it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. We could start relitigating the whole thing and we could say, oh, the GAA needs to put in another £15 million or something like that there. But all I'm trying to say, let's stick to the basics here. There's nothing we can do about inflation. Inflation has happened. And there's probably no way that we can start recalculating what was agreed in 2011 either. So let's move on from both of those things and let's have an even keel between Dublin and London, and let's also make the best use of whatever money is still available from Stormont, because there is still more money available from Stormont for other parts of football, for the grassroots football, etc., etc. So that means that we're actually helping everybody out. So you're a wee bit of an expert in all of this, Ian. So where do you stand in all of this? And
Uh,
I'm going to ask you a question first before you say what you're going
okay.
to say, and that is, what's your view on the latest proposal for Casement Park, which is 260 £1 million? Do you think they've done a good job of trying to create some kind of a compromise?
And to be frank, Gareth, I'm not actually sure what Casement Park would need or what makes it up. But I would come back to what you were saying there, and I think your analysis of it is a very fair analysis. I mean, the inflation has been an absolute bugger for the whole situation. Now we're looking, but just before I say anything about that, can I come back on a point I think Enda was making just as I joined there? And that was this idea that the 40% that's being charged to councils for council-owned premises is something specific to Derry and a couple of other tiny clubs, whatever. Coleraine is one of the clubs that probably needs more than most. Coleraine is publicly owned showgrounds. Ballymena United is publicly owned. Now, they're two substantial Irish League clubs. Personally speaking, I don't think Ballymena United need much. But realistic, the Derry thing. I don't know anybody within football who has ever questioned Derry's right to be part of this process. In fact, whenever it was first introduced in 2011, Martin McGuinness and Peter Robinson were accused of doing a carve up between East Belfast and Foyle, between the Brandywell and the Oval, right? So there's never been any suggestion Derry shouldn't get something here if they need it. What we need to be thinking about here, basically, though, is the basis of need. Derry, at the time, whenever the 2011 programme came in, Derry, the Brandywell was in pretty dire need. Now the Brandywell is not in dire need because of what Derry City and Strabane Council has actually spent on it. They've done a great job with the Brandywell, right? Now that's not to say Derry City shouldn't be coming looking for more if there's something they can justify. They should be doing that. But really, the other thing that people don't seem to be aware of is that at the time of the 2011 programme, the 36 million was made available to the Irish League football grounds. I think there was something like 10 clubs at most that were eligible to actually to apply for money on that one, and that was really Premiership clubs with what were then called designated grounds. And I think the designation meant if you aspired to be able to host 5,000 supporters, right? So that was what the view was at the time. The Oval had a separate strand that was revealed in 2015, and that was because that was that was purely a supporter safety issue. Because the Oval, which when I was a kid, I've been in the Oval when there was 30,000 there against Juventus, and that was the official attendance. God knows what was actually there. The official legal health and safety attendance um, capacity agreed with Belfast City Council at 6,500. Now, we would double that if we played Linfield, say, on Boxing Day or in a big cup game or something like that. So, from that perspective, the Oval, what was there for 10 million in the Oval 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, sorry, that would not do the job that Glentoran need. But I think Glentoran have been wise to that, and I think they have basically tailored their own requirements and own application to that. Other clubs, from what I'm led to believe, Cliftonville, Coleraine, who along with Glentoran would be seen as the ones with the greatest genuine need, I think they've both been reasonably realistic about it as well. You can look at somewhere like Portadown, again, there's a side there where there's a stand that's condemned and closed now, which probably could need to be brought down. But you've also got to consider the fact there's only a certain number of clubs either have got significant attendances or have the potential to have significant attendances. So I think that will be considered in this one. And as far as the Casement thing's concerned, I can only speak as someone who's active in the football community here. I have never heard anybody within football, apart from some people making a cheap political point, I've never heard anybody suggest that Casement should not be rebuilt. Or not so much that Casement shouldn't be rebuilt, but I've never heard anyone suggest that the GAA shouldn't be given what they're entitled to from this programme. Now, my view is that inflation obviously has impacted the Casement Park rebuild. Also, I think the original planning was very poor as well, from what I gather, and on up against a lot of objections from residents. But it does have to be recognised. Your idea, Gareth, about going to the two governments, I think makes a perfect amount of sense. And I know that GAA went to the Dublin government a while ago and got 40 or 50 million committed to Casement. Now, Jared Lawler, president of the Non-Am Football League, I think Jared indicated he was going to do something similar. And I think he'd probably be pushing a reasonably open door on that one for football. So I think we're actually reaching a fairly decent point in this process. Put it this way, there's no question that the football money can be released without the Casement money being released of some description, right? Okay. But there's no suggestion that the football can be increased without Casement being increased. So, we're at a point where I think it's going to happen, right? But it just needs to be teased along a wee bit because, your suggestion, I think, Gareth, from what I'm being told, is pretty much in line with what thinking is at the moment in the whole stadium. So I think you've got it pretty spot on.
Yeah, let me summarise again. It's very simple. I mean, we need to move with this fairly soon, otherwise the prices will have gone up even more. What is actually real is that there is a joint bid for the Women's World Cup in 2035. Plenty of time. That's actually time to make sure these stadiums are built and up and running. It's another 10 years. But the bid, so far from what I've read in the Belfast Telegraph, isn't actually all Ireland, because obviously that other one that we were looking at before was all Ireland. That bid at the moment is actually Northern Ireland and obviously Wales, England and Scotland. I'm not sure whether it could be broadened to all of Ireland or not, but let's stick with what it actually is at the moment. That's even more reason for increasing the capacity of Windsor Park and having Casement Park ready, because then, like I say, that means that there would be 2 stadia in Northern Ireland that were ready for the Women's World Cup in 2035, because they would actually need the 2 more if it is just Northern Ireland and Great Britain. Do you get where I'm coming from? Because that other tournament we were looking at, which is happening, that UEFA tournament is all of Ireland, if you know what I mean. And then obviously that means there's capacity for stadiums all over the whole island. Whereas we're more focused on the Women's World Cup, because the current bid for the Women's World Cup isn't actually Ireland and Great Britain; it's Northern Ireland. It's the UK. If you get where I'm coming from, it's a UK bid for the Women's World Cup in 2035. So there you go. We need 140. Irish government gives another 40 on top of the 40 that they already are as part of the Shared Island Fund. The UK government puts in 100. So that's a fair split, isn't it? That means that London is still providing, more than double what the South is providing. Most people would consider those proportions to be fair, but it's on the condition that 100 capital money from the UK Treasury will be replicated for the other smaller football stadiums that need work done to them. And that unlocks a second stadium for the Women's World Cup in 2035, and does whatever work needs to be done in the other stadia that Ian was talking about. And we already know that Gordon Lyons has other money for grassroots football. So therefore the grassroots football and training grounds and things like that are getting money anyway as well. And all of a sudden, we're actually ticking all boxes here, and it looks fair. It looks fair. And it means we're not thinking about what was agreed in 2011. That's ages ago. And we're not whinging because of the inflation, because we all have to deal with inflation. So even though the projects aren't all the same as each other, it does feel very equitable and fair. And it means that nobody's being left out. We more or less had a definite promise from Chris Heaton-Harris that the money would be found. And I find it very difficult, even though I have no personal interest in GAA, I find it very difficult to see how the Northern Ireland office can back out of that now. He stuck his oar in. He stuck his oar in, and he said that the money would be found. And therefore, if you want me to put a figure on it, because the Secretary of State won't put a figure on it, I'm putting a figure on it, and I'm saying no matter what would have happened, if that other tournament had taken place, add the numbers up, there's no way that the UK government could have got away with contributing any less than £100 million. So that's all I'm asking. I'm asking for London to put in 100. I'm asking for Dublin to put another 100 in, and for the next 100 to be available for the other football stadiums. I can't really see anything that's any fairer than that. I hope everybody's been able to understand what I'm saying. But it's a simple formula. We're talking about doubling the money. You double the money from Dublin, and you set the basically London pays the difference for Casement. London pays the difference. But then if London's paying the difference for Casement, then that means they have to pay the same amount for the other stadiums, and we would have more than enough money to tick absolutely every single box that we've just been talking about over the last half hour or so. So that's my wee proposal for what it's worth. And please,
Could I come in there,
yes,
please?
absolutely.
Yeah. The thing is, what Suzanne Briggs said on the V Dollar night, and she maintains that the DUP and Lyons, Gordon Lyons, is playing for time, and because the plans that Casement Park have for the for the for the field runs out next year. So I believe, and so that would suit the DUP very, very well. So it would,
Is it next March?
yeah, something like that. And within Catholic community and the Republican community, things is getting very. People are getting very uptight about this, and they want to see Casement built, and
Exactly.
so they want to see. But hold on, they want to see Casement built, and if it's not built, it has to be a must now. And if it's not built, things is going to get very unstable here.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'm not a big GAA fan, but even I can see that. You know, I can see that it would be worth his while to commit to it. You know, he has to find 200 million if you're going by my formula, but it's going to bring money in. I mean, even if that other UEFA tournament hadn't taken place, it would have brought in 100 million in its own right anyway. You know, so obviously, even though it's a while away, the Women's World Cup is going to bring in a lot of money. I know it's 10 years away. So, you know, they are going to be revenue raisers as well. And it's also going to massively upgrade the local football league, you know, whether it's IFA for the other ones or whether it's FIA for the Candy Stripes. It's going to help to modernise those leagues by carrying out those enhancements to those stadiums.
Because like you sort of touched on there, you're setting us up for the future to be able to host bigger tournaments, and that brings in obviously revenue and um for hotels, all sorts of things.
Well, that's it. If you had a rugby tournament, then you could have matches being played in Casement and in Windsor and in Ravenhill.
Yeah, yeah. And just like the Women's World Cup that's going, and that would be a big tournament, and our smaller stadiums would suit the Women's World Cup and make for a better atmosphere, I think. And the Lakes of Casement, like it's only my own personal opinion. Obviously, it's the home with Ulster GAA. Um, but it could be mixed use. I mean, if there was tournaments, I would like them. They could potentially be rugby or something, Irish rugby, or um. I think Ireland in the future is looking to possibly host the World Rugby World Cup. So uh, that and Ravenhill and uh, Casement could be potential venues. And Casement, I don't know, this is a bit of a stretch, like, but it will be used for GAA for Ulster finals and Antrim and other matches. But smaller stadium like Casement, I think it could potentially be used for not just Ulster finals, but Ulster club finals, but potentially All Ireland club finals or women's All Ireland club finals. Um, because um, the the stadium in Dublin, Croke Park, sometimes for those type of All Ireland finals, it can be too big. So there's a potential there, and even I think Belfast Celtic was a club that was massive in Belfast and Linfield's biggest rival. if you could even revive that club and get GAA, Belfast Celtic in there, and potentially rugby, I mean, you would get a lot of use out of that stadium. I think that was about it. Thanks.
But also the camogie and hurling can be played because it's a Gaelic ground, and that's the
Yeah.
main.
Yeah. Chris, I think All Ireland club finals and All Ireland camogie finals could be played at Casement because Croke Park sometimes is too big.
None of us are contradicting each other in this tonight. I think we have actually collectively solved the casement and soccer stadium problem. This is the first time there's been complete agreement on it. So I'm glad we've recorded this so that Gordon Lyons can listen to it.
This could be very valuable info for him, Gareth.
And the Secretary of State, needless to say, because he has to stop going round in circles. He's no better at not going round in circles than what Chris Heaton Harris was before him.
Because there is the potential there to host potentially an All Ireland Rugby World Cup and, like you said, Women's World Cup and other tournaments if the investment's put in. So it could be a good investment.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the total amount of extra money being invested in addition to what's already pledged is £240 million, 40 from Dublin and 200 from London. But the whole point is, it's not just going into the one project. Whereas what we had before with the old Casement Park idea was £308 million, possibly more, all going into the one stadium. Whereas what we've managed to do here is to spend 360 million. That's what the total amount is, including the amounts that were already pledged in 2011. We're spending 360 million and we're actually using it for about 5 or 6 different places. So that's what it comes down to.
Look at the Aviva, Croke Park, Thomond Park. All these stadiums have paid for themselves. And you're talking about inflation. Look at the inflation in hospitality. Look how much a pint was when Thomond Park was built for 25 million. The pint was about €3, about €6 now, so it's doubled. So this all tax money that's going back to the governments. You're talking about Windsor Park, that you might need to increase the capacity by 2,000 for this Women's World Cup. Well, that's very easily done. All you got to do is take away maybe a little bit of the corporate facilities and put in a few extra seats. So that's not going to be much of an issue. But again, nobody begrudges that. It seems to be one-way traffic. If nobody in the nationalist community begrudged Windsor or Ravenhill, but then when it goes the other side, you have the DUP and Gordon Lyons and Hilary Benn. They're all against it, and actually, the Linfield supporters could possibly be against it because their issue is that their stadium is way too big for their support base, and every time you look at it on TV, it looks like an empty stadium because they're all on the upper tier of a section behind the goal and maybe the camera side. But come back to Casement Park. That was blocked because of Gordon Lyons. He sat in his hands, and he didn't submit any. He basically blocked it. Basically, Chris Heaton Harris said we will find the money. The stadium issue is very fishy in my eyes.
It is. It's very fishy, both for Gordon Lyons and the Secretary of State. Does he not realise how problematic that is? I mean, I'm not a huge campaigner for the GAA, but from a political point of view, I can see how controversial that is if he doesn't address it.
Well, you see how big the campaign for the Irish Language Act was, and it got so big it was, I think it was Edwin Poots had to resign over it because he conceded. Well, this is talking about the DUP, obviously, but And then there was before that there was the crocodile thing, which
But what I've done with my system is to iron out all the irregularities. We're ironing out the effect of inflation, and we're ironing out the equity between all of the different stadia. Because even though it was very petty minded, there was resentment with the larger size of Casement Park, and there was resentment with the extra money that had to go in because of the inflation. Because obviously it was such a long time from 2011, whenever the original money was agreed. So, therefore, what I'm trying to say is if Dublin doubles their money and and London puts in 200 million, we're ironing out all those differences because both of the sporting codes are getting money, or I could even say all three sporting codes. Why am I saying three sporting codes? Because I'm classifying obviously Brandywell as being in a different league, in a different football league. So they're almost like a separate sporting code. We're compensating the inflation and we're providing the equity, which some people feel isn't there because of obviously the different sizes of the different stadia. Surely there isn't another formula that would be as good as that.
I'm sure the Irish government will step up, and
They've
if they
already
need,
said that they would. They already did say that they would be prepared
and I
to
think the
provide
GA
more
will step
money.
up. But the British government are the only of a three-party funding model. The British government are the only party that have not committed 1 cent, and that
Exactly.
is.
I really don't understand why. That's what I'm saying. I was watching the View on Thursday night and I really couldn't believe it. But it seems as if Helmy Ben doesn't understand. He's an intelligent guy. I have a higher opinion of him than Christopher does. I think he's the best Secretary of State that we've had for some time. A hell of a lot better than Chris Heaton Harris. But he doesn't seem to actually understand the political importance of it because he turned around, I'm sure you'll all remember a few months ago, and said, away you go and redesign Casement Park, go and design a more modest stadium. And obviously, Jarlath Burns has come back with a smaller project. He's reduced it down from £308 million to 260. I'll tell you why it's ironic. Because they're asking us to raise £113 million, right? That was the condition of the latest deal that the Assembly came back on. You go and raise £113 million. So, what the hell is the point in them asking us to raise £113 million if they're also asking us to find another £140 million for a stadium? It doesn't make any sense. They're actually contradicting themselves if they're expecting us to find another £140 million. What the hell's the point in them asking us to raise 113 if they're also asking us to find another £140 million? So I don't know what they're doing. I really don't know what the Northern Ireland office is doing. They're doing one of two things. Number one is they just don't seem to understand the implications. And number two is they're almost using it as a test. They're almost trying to test the assembly to see what the assembly can come up with. Those are my only two theories, but I, I just wonder whether Helmy Ben's a wee bit naive on it or not. But at the same time, I think he's intelligent enough not to be naive. So therefore, I don't really know what he's at, to be perfectly honest with you all.
This is an executive power that comes from Westminster, and it's not in any way built for us to be able to significantly challenge it, even if we did have a majority of MPs serving their seats and in consensus in
But
Westminster.
that's the good thing about the Women's World Cup, because the whole point is, whenever it was in the context of that earlier UEFA tournament, it was going to be capital money coming straight from London. But there has to be a reason for the capital money to come straight from London, and therefore having this here Women's World Cup tournament as part of a bid potentially unlocks direct capital money from London. That it potentially unlocks the extra £100 million, which is needed for Casement, with the assumption, obviously, that the Irish
Hmm
government puts in another 50 million euros, stroke 40 million pounds. So I agree with you. They should be willingly giving it anyway, especially because of the political implications. But if we have to use the Women's World Cup as a reason for it, then maybe that's what what's
Well,
the
listen, it's International Women's Day, Gareth, today.
very
So it is.
appropriate.
The big problem is Westminster, is my sort of final
Well, that's
observation on this.
I agree with you, especially after watching the View on Thursday night. I mean, he doesn't seem to be getting it, if you know what I mean. But he needs to have the right formula to follow, and obviously the Women's World Cup provides a wee bit of a reason for extra capital money from London. But he needs to recognise the political peril for not getting it right. But that formula that I have injects enough money into the system to please everybody. And like various contributors have said tonight, it's an extra £200 million from London, which is soon going to be paid back by all the benefits that would come from those different projects.
I want them all to come together for a major rally in Belfast from all the GAA clubs in Belfast to Casement Park.
Chris,
I've been throwing out fielders about this, so I have.
Well,
Chris,
I
you
think
just
that's quite a reasonable thing to do because it's a wee bit like the farmers protested about their inheritance tax. You know, the GAA would be perfectly entitled to do something like that, you know, especially with the vagueness of the Secretary of State.
Chris, it's a good idea, and you can get all Ulster involved. Donegal, Kevin Monaghan as well. I mean, there's a massive community here.
Well, it's just getting, there'll be thousands of it, and if you include the 9 counties or even the 32 counties, you'll be stuffing out wee West Belfast, Casement Park
Thank
heights.
you
So
very much.
Gareth, just when you were saying there about Hillary Benn and you sort of think that he's expecting the executive to raise the money like for Casement, what does he expect us to cut?
I don't know. He's a wee bit vague about it. Earlier on in the year, what he said was away you go and redesign the stadium, you know, away you go and reduce the price of the stadium. And the GAA has done that because it was going to cost at least £308 million, possibly more. So they have reduced it down to £260 million. I think maybe they lowered the height of the stadium, you know, they lowered the number of rows of seats because they no longer needed that specification with it not being UEFA. So anyway, that there has been done. They've saved at least 50 million off the price, but it still would require an extra 140 million that we don't have because the only money is the money that's already been pledged, which is 120 million pounds. So you're quite right. As things stand, Hilary Benn has expected us to find 140 million pounds from other parts of the Assembly's money. And the total amount of money spent would be the original 120 plus the extra 40 from Dublin and the extra 200 from London. That total amount is 360 million. Therefore, we have just sorted out 5 or 6 stadiums for 360 million pounds instead of spending 308 million pounds on one stadium. That is the bottom line here. Do people not realise how significant that is? There was huge criticism for £308 million being spent on Casement Park. And now, once we add all those numbers together, we are spending £360 million on 5 or 6 stadia. We're giving the GAA what they need, we're giving the IFA what they need, and we're giving the FIA in the Brandywell what they need as well. Is that not what we call solving the Casement Park stroke soccer problem? That formula covers absolutely everything. So maybe we could bring that topic to a close now.